Hi, John. Welcome back to Airhex FM. And we are after Red Hat Summit, I think, right?
Yep, after Red Hat Summit, and thank you very much. Glad to be here again.
Yeah, and were there any news at the Red Hat Summit? Or what happened? What are the biggest news for you?
The biggest news for me at Summit. Well, I'm being somewhat self-focused here, I guess. But for me, some of the bigger news is we still have Quarkus out there. We have a new Quarkus release, and it's actually supported now. So if there's people are looking for support, we didn't make an announcement around it, but it's actually supported.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that's even though it was there's no PR on it. For me that was pretty important.
Okay, and how it works? So you can just go to Red Hat and buy support, or is it how to get support?
Red Hat Runtimes. Yeah, it's Red Hat Runtimes is the is the product, and it's the Red Hat build of Quarkus is the official name, but it's under the Red Hat Runtime SKU. So if you just go to one of the product pages, or you talk to your salesperson, it's just Red Hat Runtimes.
Okay, and does it work similar to JBoss, where the supported version is older than the actual one, or you can just go with the open source and then buy support on top of it?
So the way Red Hat basically does all of their open source projects is they do actually have internal builds of the upstream open source. So being consistent with the way Red Hat productizes its product, it is actually a separate download or separate Maven repo in this case that is productized, and we support that productized set of bits.
So the recent version is supported. So I think it was 1.4.1, right? So is it supported?
I think it's 1.3.1 right now.
Okay, so it's not bad. Mm-hmm. It was were no 0.7 or something. It would be bad news, but
no. But this is the thing with open source, right? If you look, it moves pretty darn quickly. And if you look, Quarkus upstream has a lot of tech preview inserted in there, and so for a lot of organizations, it's not, they're looking for a little bit more stability when they have support, and so that's one of the reasons why Red Hat approaches things this way, right? Is it's stable, supportable versus upstream, which just moves more quickly, right? So
I just forgot about your title. So what's your title? Is you a product manager for Quarkus, or what's?
It's same as it's ever been. The Talking Heads. I don't know if you remember that song. It's I'm a senior principal product manager.
Okay.
So I do product management, kind of just around next generation platforms. So that means I do a lot of work, or as you know, I do a lot of work upstream with MicroProfile. I do some work upstream with Jakarta. I do a lot of work with Quarkus. Although the productization of Quarkus was actually done by Thomas Vardstrom. So he's the product PM, but I do a lot of work around it, kind of from an upstream perspective.
Okay, and what are you doing? So what's your job right now? So what are you doing the whole day? I mean, so you are just thinking about features or coordinating teams, or what's going on?
Well, interestingly enough, it's actually a decent chunk of MicroProfile right now.
Okay.
So MicroProfile has to move to a working group within the within the Eclipse Foundation. Basically, because of IP flow, you want to protect, have this IP flow so that as IP flows from an organization, like a vendor, down to folks that work on the technology within MicroProfile, to implementations of MicroProfile, because MicroProfile produces specs, down to the end users, you want to have kind of this clean IP flow. And to have that clean IP flow, one of the things, due to legal documents you sign and stuff, you actually have to have a working group in place. So right now we're working on a MicroProfile working group in the Eclipse Foundation, and there's formal stuff that has to be done, right?
Oh.
It's almost like building a product, right? You have to talk. There's whether it's legal or documentation or QE, right? You got to kind of assemble all these things. It's kind of similar, even creating a working group, right? You have to talk to various organizations. You have to make sure that you have infrastructure, like a web page for the working group, all sorts of stuff that has to get done. And so right now we're actually working on, so I do some of that background work. And there's actually, I'm tracking all the stuff in GitHub. So if you just go to, GitHub/Eclipse/MicroProfile, there's a GitHub issue where I track all this stuff.
Okay.
And then the biggest thing is the working group draft, right? So what does it mean to be a MicroProfile working group, right? Who can join? Who can vote? What are the kind of the overall principles, stuff like that, right? It's kind of an organizational document that you have to have in place. And so I'm kind of helping manage that on behalf of the community as we edit this.
Okay. So it sounds like politics to me.
It is actually. It is,
but you are a technical guy. I mean,
well, a product manager is here's the thing about product managers is you sit between also you kind of sit in the middle of a lot of different things, right? You work with engineering, and there's some product managers that are very technical, right? So I do a lot of technical stuff. Some product managers are more business savvy, and so they're more process kind of product managers. I tend to be on the more technical side.
Yeah.
So yes, via the various conversations we've had over the years, right? I can have very technical conversations, but I also have to be able to build messaging, working with marketing, like I mentioned, making sure all the legal stuff is signed off, and work with other product groups, right? And talk alignment strategies between products. And so you have politics in product management, even without something like the MicroProfile working group. So, you really want to make sure that you can, be able to work with various groups. There's a little bit of program management in there as well, I guess, but I'd never personally want to be a program manager. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
Because I'd lose the technical aspect, right?
Okay.
So
why are you involved with MicroProfile? Yeah. I mean, the coupling between MicroProfile and Quarkus is a little bit loose because, to my understanding, Quarkus is more than MicroProfile. So why you do so much work with MicroProfile right now?
So we founded MicroProfile in 2016, right? And so
was that long ago? I remember.
Yeah, exactly. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was founded in 2016. Red Hat and myself was heavily involved. So I kind of, in various contexts, say I'm a co-founder because I was involved in setting up MicroProfile personally on behalf of Red Hat.
Yes.
And so I've never left. So I'm still, along with Kevin Sutter, co-leads of MicroProfile. And in the Eclipse Foundation, all a project co-lead means is you're a committer, just like all the other committers, but you just kind of try and manage things like roadmaps and, making sure that things are moving along. That's really, you have no more or no less, responsibilities in terms of, no more power, I guess. I don't really want to use the word power, but you're just a committer that tries to move things along, right? So I've been that way. I've been kind of a co-lead and a committer since the Eclipse Foundation, which is probably closer to 2017. So I still do that, and so that's still a primary role for me, even though Quarkus has been around for a little over a year now.
So one question then regarding MicroProfile. As you remember our conversation, so at the beginning, you always were concerned with the speed and cloud native, and my answer was always no. Why you're doing this? Whitefly is just fine. And the question is, at the beginning, you saw the goal that MicroProfile becomes more than Java EE, that the metrics and what we have, OpenAPI and all this stuff on top. Because at the beginning, MicroProfile was very limited. So I actually wanted to have more than you. You say, okay, we just start with JAX-RS. I wanted to have, the asynchronous stuff and more than actually you wanted and the others. So for me, it was pointless at the beginning. So, okay, MicroProfile, this is like, crippled Java EE. Who cares about that? But now it's just really capable. Now I really like MicroProfile because I get added value out of that, right? So I have a config, I have metrics, I have OpenAPI. I actually really enjoy MicroProfile. So the question to you, it just happened, or was it your vision from the beginning that MicroProfile becomes a lot more than Jakarta EE?
The vision was never to become more or less necessarily than Jakarta EE. It was we have a gap in the industry around microservices standards, right? And so when we founded MicroProfile, the whole idea is to build out specifications for the development of microservices and to do it quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think at the beginning was more or less a hack, to have the next release of Java EE a little bit earlier, I think, right? This was the thing with the profile. Remember the conversation with profile and
Yeah. Could it be a profile within Jakarta or something like that? Maybe. But right now I see them there's very ways you can kind of carve this. So in some ways I see them targeting different markets. And there's obviously a gray area, right? You can write monoliths with Quarkus and you could write microservices with Java EE, right? So it's gray. But when I look at things, it's like the Red Hat user base that uses, for example, Wildfly and JBoss EAP. I don't think that they want the rapid pace of development that MicroProfile offers for the entirety of Java EE, right? It's like a segmented market. Some people want stability. Some people want to move fast. And interestingly, it's not necessarily at the organization level, right? You have various teams within an organization that may have the flexibility to move fast, and some organizations that intentionally want to move slow and stable and more stably because they're risk averse and they want stability and they have existing services that they want to incrementally extend, right? So I don't necessarily see more as, one being more than the other. I see it as I'm more cautious on the Jakarta side in how it evolves. Whereas from day one, we've stated, hey, with MicroProfile, we're going to move faster. We've already had major releases of MicroProfile Health, and we've broken backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
Right. Now, we don't do it willy-nilly. We do it in a concerted way, but it's a different kind of approach. Now, imagine if we took a very conservative organization and we said, across a handful of specs, guess what? We broke backwards compatibility. If you want to upgrade to the next version of our product, then you're going to have to rewrite some code.
But I think
right? It just doesn't fly.
Yeah, but I think it is not as bad because if you look at the Jakarta EE, what it actually does, the major part is CDI, of course. So there's the backbone of everything. And then, of course, JPA is also used a lot, and they have to be rock solid. But if you take a look at MicroProfiles, the interesting part is it is very powerful, but is not intrusive. For instance, let's assume you would break a health check, right? So if you look at the health check API, there are basically 3 annotations. So if you break this, and a microservice is probably at most, I would see 3 health checks, usually 1, right? 1 probe with readiness and liveness, and that's basically it. So it's just very easy to fix. The same story is with Prometheus metrics. It's not like, every method has metrics. So there are projects like that, but this is pointless. Usually you have, a few meaningful metrics which are exposed. So if you break something, I only have to identify, these 5 metrics and fix them. It's not like, and if you break CDI, everything is broken. So it takes a lot more time and energy to fix things in Jakarta EE than in MicroProfile. This is my observation.
So yeah, I remember you. It was very interesting to me that you kind of carved or described MicroProfile this way, in that it tends to create specifications that deal with external things, right?
Yes.
Whether it's external projects, external standards, and I'd never really thought of it that way. So to me, that was a new idea in terms of how to think about MicroProfile. I don't think it applies 100%.
No.
So it might in terms of Open API or tracing.
Fault tolerance
or
is the exception,
like that, right?
Fault tolerance is the exception.
Well, I would say metrics is too, because it's not just about exposing platform and vendor performance metrics, right, out to the end user. Sorry, out to Prometheus. It's also, you can write business metrics.
This is what I
right.
This is what I say. So I'm absolutely, in my projects, I cannot remember we really relied on the technical metrics. What we always start, with a view counters, like business metrics, how much stuff was bought and whatever, how many messages were wrong typed and how many timeouts we had. It was always business metrics. This is what we do. And the technical metrics, they are just there. So this is this is my feedback to you. And regarding the whitefly, what you said with the support, also interesting observation. In one project, it was actually a microservice project, and we had to use the JBoss EIP because the project was really, really important. But my clients didn't mind, to use SmallRye as a patch to have the full MicroProfile support. So they say because the risk was very low, and we used JSON Web Token. I remember, so we patched JSON Web Tokens and. Metrics were not back then not existing. So okay, and my argumentation was, look, when the metrics will break, it is even we can also. So which option do we have, right? We could implement our own metrics, so the chances are even higher that they will break, or we pick SmallRye, and if they break, we don't use them. So I mean, the risk was really, really low. So if you have just the Jakarta EE platform, and then you have to expose metrics. So if you take SmallRye and patch the Jakarta EE and it works, it is a way better solution on top of supported platform than implemented by yourself. So I don't think this is critical. So you can still have the base platform which is supported. For me, Jakarta is more like Linux. Linux has to be rock solid, but it's not like I recently, last week actually, upgraded from CentOS 7 to CentOS 8, and for me was like a non-event. It's not like everything is better. It just works as it worked before, and I just did it because I had some time. So and this is for me also. I have to say I lost my excitement about Jakarta EE since Jakarta EE 6. So this Java E5 and Java E6. So Java E5 was already fine, and 6 was great. And then I say, okay, whether Java E7 will come out or not, I'm really, really happy. It's very similar to Java 8. Java 8 is a huge event. Whether I'm using Java 8, JDK 11 or 14, it is okay, but not like I'm extremely excited about Java 15 or whatever, right? And this is what people don't understand. This is you cannot just innovate like crazy in CDI. And because it is 90% is already solved, and if you think about new features, it's really harder and harder to find something sensible, which with added value to cooperation. And MicroProfile will have moved faster because the CNCF moves like crazy, and we get more and more interesting parts, right?
Yeah. So there's like a Venn diagram of how I see Jakarta and MicroProfile, right? So in the overlapping area, what I see are some of the specs that you mentioned. Actually, it's a Venn diagram with three things probably.
CDI, JSON
Sorry, I'm
B,
trying
and
to
JSON
mentally
B, right?
visualize this. No. Between MicroProfile, Jakarta, and something like, and the third one would be Quarkus and Helidon, right? Where you have Jakarta is really a collection of specifications. One of those specifications is the platform spec, right? But you have a ton of specifications like, servlet that are used all over the place outside the platform, right? Spring, right, uses, I don't know, half a dozen Java EE specs, for instance.
Yeah.
Then you've got MicroProfile, which adds, it leverages some of the Jakarta EE specs. So it picks the ones that it thinks are relevant, most relevant. I don't want overstate it, to microservices, right? That lets us build a core programming model.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put it that way, upon which you can build other specs and just rely those things being there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the CDI, the JAX-RS, and the JSON. Then you have this third thing at the bottom. That's, the the helidon and Quarkus that say, okay, we're going to implement MicroProfile and some of the Jakarta specs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so one of the values, I think, of MicroProfile is, again, I think helidon and Quarkus they're new, they're moving faster, they're innovating faster. A lot of it's because they don't have this install base that you have with Jakarta or Spring or anything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's new. It has the flexibility to do that. So what it's doing is it's picking, okay, MicroProfile is moving fast. So we're going to leverage the MicroProfile APIs. We can support some of these other APIs like you mentioned, and they're good examples like JPA. WebSockets or whatever, right? So it picks things from the base platform because MicroProfile is feature rich, but it's not complete, right? There's no persistence API,
Mm-hmm.
and so let's use JPA. Fine, makes sense. And so that's what we're doing. So I see these as three separately moving but interrelated circles on this Venn diagram.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the discussion whether they should be merged or not, in my opinion, they should be kept separated, because from architectural perspective, they have different pace, and that pace is not dictated by the vendors, rather than by the fact that the Jakarta EE is actually all about Java. Yeah, actually yes, there is a little bit of REST.
Yeah.
JAX-RS. If HTTP changes, probably we'll have to change, JAX-RS, but this is unlikely. Oh, who knows? The next HTTP.
Yeah. That makes sense. HTTP 2, right?
Yeah, and HTTP 3 is serverless. Yeah, you're right. And JPA, we already had the conversation of what to do with NoSQL, and back then I remember the Java 1 session where they invited the audience, and no one had a great idea what to do, because you could actually do already great things with JPA. And and MicroProfile, as I said, if you, for instance, emit metrics, they have to have the open metrics or Prometheus format. You cannot just invent your own format, because it will never get accepted, right? And if let's say service mesh becomes a part of Kubernetes and OpenShift, and this is like the de facto standard, then we have to think about what to do with fault tolerance, or whether circuit breaker what do this, and how to adapt to that, right? And next thing could be cloud events. If the cloud events become a thing, probably we could do something with MicroProfile. And also logging. Now there was some discussion about logging. From my perspective, it would be enough, to have one interface with 3 parameters which logs to system out. And this how I would start with this thing. And this could be useful things. And but I'm glad you see this from your perspective, but a little bit differently from my angle, and how I explain it in projects. My clients look at me and say, "Okay, we got it." So this seems like it seems logical to users, and you have complete different perspective because you are implementing this stuff. So you see everything from you have the internal point of view. And
this is actually really good feedback. I mean, I do find it a very interesting perspective.
Mm-hmm. And this is my official and no official explanation. I thought a lot about that, and I also observed the CNCF itself. So they had the metrics, and then they have open telemetry, I think, and they rename it. They try to merge Open API on Open Tracing and on metrics. And if this gets merged, so we will have to do something about that. It will impact MicroProfile, but Jakarta EE will remain the same. So from my perspective, it makes absolute sense. And what's and also interesting, the Helidon and Quarkus are both really interesting frameworks. So they're almost opposite architectures, where Helidon, you write your own main method, and then you are in charge how to start the thing. And Quarkus happened right now in this release. I think you have more influence how to start and stop, the Quarkus. But what I like about Quarkus, and this is also funny, to observe. Sometimes I hear, the argument Quarkus is not MicroProfile compatible, and this is like I really don't care. I mean, how much affect this my project, and how long would it take to take Quarkus and migrate to Helidon? This is the point, whether it is 100% MicroProfile compatible or not. The question for me is it how beneficial is it, and how much am I depending on Quarkus? So in the last AHEX Live event 2 days ago, we had a conversation about panache, So should we use it or not? It's like, okay. I mean, I like it. The thing is, it is completely Red Hat invention. I mean, Red Hat with community, of course. And if it dies, you will have to migrate somewhere else. And I mean, if you stick with Hibernate, the chances are lesser that something happens, but you have to write more code. So this is the thing. And if you have, a microservice architecture, and you have a small service which uses panache, no one will care. If you have a huge monolith, with hundreds of entities and everything is panache depending, then you have to think about, and if this is the strategic decision, I would go to panache, see how many contributors there are, how active they are, and then you can decide whether it's a good thing or not. And then I show them, the whole class hierarchy, and I show actually panache is more like repository pattern implemented by someone. It's not like, complete magic.
Well, it does both.
Yeah.
It does the active. It does the active record
and
pattern,
the entity.
That's how people. And the repository pattern, right? So you kind of have the choice.
Yeah,
now,
but you can move up the hierarchy and see what happens. So if you go to repository, you see, get entity manage and persist is not like magic. You actually, this is like fully implemented repository, right? It's not.
I don't know. See, I don't really use the repository pattern. I always use active record.
Yeah,
so
me as well.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's how I see Quarkus playing out, extending that answer, and it's not a complete answer yet because everything is still evolving. But Quarkus is, in some cases, it's coming up with complete new frameworks, right? Like. And in some cases, it's extending existing frameworks. So Panache is a good example of extending JPA. In some cases, like if you look at reactive routes, which is just layered on top of Vertex routes, then you have a fully asynchronous way, more like a Node.js or Vertex way of mapping, routes to logic. And I see Quarkus as kind of trying these things out in a Java context and figuring out how popular they are and if developers like it. And then maybe what Red Hat can do is contribute those back, whether it's Jakarta or MicroProfile.
Yes, and this is the danger. Right? What I said, because if you look at the number of extensions, it grows like exponentially, right? So if you go list extensions, you have, I think, at least 30 camel extensions and others.
Okay.
And
I checked.
Yeah.
Sorry, I checked just before the call because I figured this might come up.
Okay.
It's literally like 220 total extensions. And when we launched, by the way, it was 40, period.
Yes.
So in a year, we've gone from 40 to 220. And about half of them, almost exactly half, I think it's 109, are, well, actually, the other half, so it's 111 are camel related, right? So it's all about enterprise integration patterns. So you have 109 kind of traditional Java EE or reactive style extensions, and then the other half are around enterprise integration patterns. So it's about half-half.
Yeah, but some of them will die. So I mean, you will get more and more extensions, and I think in one point of time you have to say this particular extension was not accepted by community, so it will be deprecated. So there will be a process like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and
now what's interesting is that some of those extensions are actually being contributed by the community.
No.
Right? So
this is not a criticism, just a fact. So I got the question.
Oh no, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
At the AHEX Live, we started with the. Someone asked me about my opinion about the Jook, Jooq. It's just and then I showed them Panache, and they say okay, but Panache is also proprietary, and Jooq is also proprietary. What's the difference, right? So we had a conversation about that, and so my point is just if you rely on MicroProfile inside Quarkus, then the chances are almost zero that something will be removed. And if it is going to be removed, you can just move to Helidon, And if Panache becomes a MicroProfile standard, this is a completely different story. this could be an interesting part,
right.
because MicroProfile is lacking persistence. So this could be an interesting proposal to pick, Panache and make it a MicroProfile spec that could be implemented by Helidon. This would be great, for instance.
Yeah, well, should it be Jakarta? Should it, because it's GPA related? Should it happen in MicroProfile because it wants to move quickly? If and when Red Hat thinks it's appropriate to, to decide to create a spec out of it. It's still changing a lot. There's still a lot of feedback, so it's too early. But at some point, where it goes is going to depend on maybe how stable it is. That's probably going to be a big piece of it, to be honest. It would have a persistent solution, a persistence API, but in reality, it's just an extension of GPA, right, which is already there.
But from programming perspective, it looks a little bit different. Right, so this is if you as a developer,
I agree.
And you look at Panache, there's actually, if you just go with the entity model, active record model, it looks like a domain-driven design on steroids, right? So you have just entities and say, this is really nice, and you don't see the entity manager. So if you just follow the abstract classes, you will find the entity manager inside, which makes me happy because actually this is just JPA. Nicely packaged, so the chances are very low that something can happen because I could fix it by myself, right? So, yeah. And so what's also interesting in Quarkus, I think this is the very first opinionated framework, right? Because it reminds me a little bit on Ruby on Rails back then. I mean, this is as a positive way, not negative way, because at the beginning they just said, okay, whatever, we just provide complete solution. And they provided everything, was nicely documented, and they showed, on stage how easy it is to create a block. And block, right? And at Quarkus is also, I mean, if you go to extensions, you see all the tutorials and everything, plays well together. And because it's opinionated and because you have to optimize a lot, it is not fully compatible. So I think this is, the trade-offs are interesting, right? Because I saw somewhere in the mailing list like Quarkus does not support, I forgot, portable extensions. And I thought about this, okay. I think
portable extensions that's missing.
I think the last time I wrote a portable extension was an article for Oracle, actually, or the magazine, or Java magazine, or Oracle magazine. And in project, as a developer, you shouldn't write portable extensions because it's just too much magic. So no one, a developer in a larger project, and you write extension and something happens behind the scenes, no one will expect something like this. So I have to say, in a Jakarta EE project, I would never expect seeing an extension. So extension is more interesting if you are building a product. So if you have to augment some code or do something for Quarkus or server developers, the extensions are perfect. But for applications developers, for me, a extension would be a defect because someone will a little bit show off and see, show off what she or he can do and confuse other developers.
Well, okay, there's a session at Red Hat Summit I should point people to.
Yeah.
It's Vodafone Greece did a presentation on why they moved from Spring to Quarkus. And one of the things in there that the speaker stated was that they plan to write extensions. So keep in mind what extensions do. It really can come in handy for two primary reasons. So this isn't something a general developer would use, right? Like
exactly.
If you have a platform group within your organization that everybody's supposed to standardize on, right? Or if you expect to share your stuff around, then it might make sense that you can write an extension. So an extension does two really useful things. First thing it does is it enables the integration of whatever the framework is into the configuration subsystem of Quarkus. So that means they can configure that framework using the application.properties file. Right? And that to me is a very valuable thing if you have a corporate standard framework, right? Internal framework. The second reason is because you can get optimizations with startup time and memory utilization if you write an extension, right? So if you have something that is, typically a large resource consumer, what you could do is write an extension and have it pre-optimized so that it is, managed, so that it runs more efficiently at runtime. For a good example, if your internal framework uses XML, right? you're carrying in a traditional framework, you're carrying that XML parsing overhead. Even if that's the only thing it does is configuration file, with XML, you're carrying around the footprint of that XML parser just to start up and parse a file. With Quarkus, if your framework uses XML, it will parse that XML at build time, and you won't have to carry that parser at runtime in memory.
Yeah, but
right? So those are two very useful things, even for an internal framework.
But I could use Quarkus extensions. I don't have to use CDI extensions for that.
No, I was mixing. I was talking. I'm sorry. I was talking Quarkus extensions.
No.
Whenever you use the word extension,
I saw criticism that Quarkus does not support CDI extensions. And I say, okay, the CDI extension, they are nice. And the CDI extensions are nice, but I mean, in an average project, if someone implements a business logic in CDI extension, this would be for me a defect. This would too much magic. The Quarkus extensions, you are absolutely right. That is like the Quarkus way of contributing. Even without the extensions, I think it's impossible to have GraalVM optimization, right? Because you have to expose some classes, and this is a different story. They are not portable, but they are Quarkus. So, I mean, this is how Quarkus operates. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah. So, I did understand the first part of your earlier comments about portable extensions, but then when you used extensions standalone, I lost that.
Okay. No
CDI
problem.
Context.
CDI. I mean, the Quarkus is not fully... Also, there are some minor incompatibilities with JAX-RS, but what's interesting is the opinionation. You say, okay, this is like it is, and we go this way. The only thing which annoys me in Quarkus, a small thing, is the name of the application.properties and not npconfig. I would expect that this is the only thing, because at the beginning I was really confused. Why is application properties and not microprofile properties? I understand that Quarkus is more than microprofile, but I mean. And I think you should support both, application properties, and there is the microprofile file, then should be supported as well.
Yeah, it supports both. And it also supports YAML, but among other,
you should not mention that. Keep it secret.
Oh, why is Bruno Borges listening?
Yeah. Bruno likes actually YAML, or I think this was a joke. Oh, okay.
Okay, is it a joke?
I don't know. I suspect this because he loves YAML, and I thought this was a joke. I have to ask him.
I don't know. Okay, so Quarkus supports microprofile config, and the way it works is microprofile config is fully supported. If you have anything, if you have properties defined in application of properties as well, then they override what's in the microprofile config.
Oh, cool.
So.
When it happened? Recently, right?
No, that's been there since day one.
Because I did a tool, the Jotanizer, and it generated the microprofile config file, and it was not picked up by Quarkus, I remember back then. And then I asked someone to say, yeah, this was even proposal from Ken Finnegan, I think.
I thought it was there from day one, because
no matter, but
maybe the very, very early builds it wasn't.
But this is fine. If you support
I thought
both,
we fixed that fairly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I did a live hangout, O'Reilly live hangout, live training on Quarkus and microprofile. And the advice I use there is, if portability is important to you, then use the microprofile config .properties. I mean, the reason why we have an application .properties file, Quarkus isn't just microprofile, right? There's a lot of Vertex stuff in there and stuff. So using microprofile.properties only can have a misleading kind of context. So having both is a good thing. And there has to be an order of precedence. So application overrides microprofile property file.
And what else happened at the Red Hat Summit? So what interests me is, are there any other interesting news for people outside Red Hat according to Java-related news, let's say?
Java-related news. Boy. I'll be honest. I'm mostly focused on just the Quarkus stuff.
Or Quarkus. Just go Quarkus. It's also interesting.
Yeah, Quarkus. So I wrote a blog post on Quarkus.io that provides a link to all the Quarkus-related sessions.
Yes.
So that's the all the user stories. There was I think 4 different Quarkus end users
Mm-hmm.
presented, and I've watched a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
Haven't watched them all. There's presentations regarding camel, right? And so some things that touch Quarkus, like right, all the extensions in camel and camel K and stuff like that. Quarkus is a runtime for camel K.
Mm-hmm.
So you have these various sessions that target it. So just take a look at the blog file. Sorry, at the blog.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there's no way to deep link past the login page to point directly at a session.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to log in.
Okay.
And then you can just do a search for the session name.
Okay. Another question which interests me is who actually decides from... I don't think this is all about community. So who is in charge now of direction of Quarkus? Is it one person, or is it you have a committee at Red Hat, or how it actually works? So because, it seems like just community would be a mess. So I cannot... and it seems like you have at least a direction, So the camel stuff happened, then you have, a little bit of Qt, then you have the panache, and this is like the direction seems to be really fast, but it's directed. It's not like, complete mess, I would expect in a community-driven project, or too much, committees and talking. There's like really fast-paced, direction. So how it works actually?
So Red Hat is a fairly bottom-up organization. Unlike some of the larger organizations that may be top-down, because they have a lot of I don't know, it's more traditional, right? Top-down, I guess. Whereas at Red Hat, it's fairly bottom-up. So if you look at what Quarkus really is, it pulls on the experience of our Vertex team,
yep.
right? Underlying a lot of Quarkus is Vertex, right? Even the JAX-RS stack now is layered on top of Vertex, and asynchronous and everything, right? Then you got our, MicroProfile team. Then you got, some of the folks that work on the Jakarta Java EE stuff, right? So you've got things in there like, panache and WebSockets and some of the other stuff that are extensions. And then you have our Spring team, right? So you got a bunch of Spring compatibility frameworks. And so what you'll find is people are in some way saying, how can I take what I've got and integrate it with Quarkus? So what you're starting to see is a lot of the Red Hat middleware is beginning to layer on top of Quarkus, right? So you've got Camel, right, and Fuse are beginning to layer on top of Quarkus, and you're going to see other ones as well, because the memory footprint savings, even on the JVM, I mean, just take native compilation out of it, and the startup time improvements are really meaningful, right? And since, right, we're a Kubernetes OpenShift, right, container kind of company, that's a really big deal. So in some sense, people see it as a way to optimize their own stacks, and express their value at Red Hat, through their various projects, and extend that value into Quarkus itself. So that's some of it. Early on, it started out with a very core set of people. So, Emmanuel Bernard is an example, and Jason Green, right? Those are a couple of guys that are kind of the engineering face of Quarkus. And, there's a team of others behind it, right? Ken Finnegan was there too with, from a MicroProfile Thorntail aspect. And so, there was a very early, base set of ideas, for Quarkus around, build time, build time optimizations, and native compilation capability, but leveraging all the frameworks people already know, right? The JPA and MicroProfile and Jakarta stuff. So that kind of provided the foundation. And what you're seeing, interestingly, to some degree, is you're seeing, we don't want to sway from that core foundation, right? If you do an extension and you want it in our repo, then it's got to compile to native, right? So we have kind of these some core principles, not that you have to run it native, but it has to be able to compile to native.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these core principles. It has to work in dev mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So
is there something like a manifest? What to do?
There's a contributing guide. Well, there's an extension guide.
Okay.
On how to write your own extension. I wouldn't even say that's like a principles document, a manifesto or a principles document or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, here's what you want to do. Here's how you do it. Here's why you might want to do it. But that's a good question. I don't know if we have that somewhere in saying that. But there might be an FAQ that we created that has some of that in there.
But I got you. So the answer is basically you have the teams which provide, Vertex and all the others. They're already going in the direction. And with Quarkus, you get an integration point, and everyone contributes to Quarkus because they save, memory and CPU cycles, and it's a popular framework. So everyone is on Quarkus right now, would like to be, and this is why everything seems to be working that well, because everyone is interested in Quarkus, right? So no one is forced to use Quarkus. Everyone would like to be on Quarkus, right?
It's definitely pull.
Yeah.
It's definitely pull. People are being pulled in just because of the value proposition. And I'll be honest, it's like they can develop pretty quickly using Quarkus, right? With all the live coding stuff and built in. So even writing extensions or migrating your app on top of Quarkus becomes, pretty portable. So now on top of this, what you're starting to see is more so than early on, we're starting to be driven somewhat by community feedback. So your point is, it's not pure community in that it's driven by independent contributors, but we do have external contributions. So I mentioned a couple like Hazelcast, there's Flyway, and I think Vault might have been external too. And we're probably somewhere between a half a dozen and a dozen external contributions. The JSF folks, right, now have support on Quarkus. And so when they want to contribute an extension, usually they come to either our dev alias or our Zulip channel, and they say, hey, we want to do something. And they typically work with one of the core contributing members on, what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? How do I make it work? And so we instill those principles. But now what you're even starting to see is feedback from those open source contributors providing that same kind of feedback to other people interested in writing extensions, right? So the community aspect is definitely growing, which is awesome to see.
Yeah.
So during this time we are trying to maintain this core set of principles.
Yeah, and what's also feedback to you? So the extensions part, I was in a larger project with an internal developer. So and he was very proud. He says like, hey, I've wrote my first Quarkus extension. I would never expect that. It's just like I expected he wanted to try the microservice in Quarkus. Now he started with the extension. So okay, nice, and it was just Hello World was really proud about the extension. So I think. No kidding. So, honest observation, at least in Europe, Quarkus is, I think, one of the fastest growing frameworks right now. So it is like it grows like crazy. And at the AirHacks live at the workshop 2 days ago, someone told me with Quarkus now they can do Jakarta EE again. So they are really glad that they come back, to the nice and easy to use APIs. And I say, okay, this is interesting because I never did something else. But if you enjoyed, that much is an interesting part. So I think what's really unique with Quarkus is that it is extremely innovative, but you don't have to relearn your skills. And to give you an example, in one project we had to convert Kafka messages to WebSockets. And SSE at the same time, and we started with what my client started with JAX-RS, but because of programming mistake, it didn't work, and then he tried Vertex, because you can do the same with Vertex, And Vertex was extremely complicated. So if you look at Vertex, it is very powerful, but it's like expert tool, I would say. And
it's totally unopinionated, and it's a toolkit.
Yeah. But if you
the Vertex team will specifically tell you that.
Yeah, and he was really completely helpless. Like, okay, this is crazy. I cannot make it work. And then with Quarkus, we just took the MicroProfile reactive messaging. I think I confused the both specs. So both about messaging. That one where say incoming and outgoing. So we just took an incoming message from Kafka, and outgoing we just mapped to SSE and WebSocket, and it worked right away. So there was actually okay, this is not about Quarkus. It was about MicroProfile. It would also work somewhere else, but it was problem solved. And this is the power. Now, if you would force that everyone who would like to use Quarkus will have to learn, let's say, Vertex. For instance, for me, it would be completely uninterested framework. So for me, it would be forget it. But now, for instance, some of my clients would like to migrate from Java EE to Quarkus. So okay, let's do it. Not a problem. I mean, there's not a huge risk because in case Quarkus dies, let's say, we can migrate to helidon or somewhere else. It's not like you are completely, depending on a proprietary framework. So I would say we have the first time something which is extremely beneficial from memory and CPU perspective, which is very important for marketing. So I don't care that much, but it's really important for adoption. But you don't have to relearn your skills. So this is the point, and this combination is perfect.
So I'll tell you what. I'm going to point back to that Vodafone Greece session. I think you really should watch it because while you might think memory and startup time is good for marketing, okay, it is, right? I mean, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's also got some serious real world benefits. So if you look at what the problem Vodafone had is they had these services that would take like 40 seconds to start, right? And the problem became when the Kubernetes cluster realized that they started getting increased traffic, so they needed to add replicas. Before the new instances started, because it took 40 seconds, the old services were already overloaded and failing, right? And the users, the callers, were getting errors. And so what they found is when they moved this to Quarkus, this completely eliminated this problem because it started, it went from 40 seconds down to 14, and this is all on the JVM, by the way. They went from 12 replicas, between 2 to 12 replicas to serve that traffic, down to 2 to 4 with Quarkus. They went down, they used half the CPU and half the RAM.
No, I was in project.
Quarkus. But my point is that the startup time, and the memory utilization in the context of Kubernetes, which is don't forget that this is kind of one of the main focuses of Quarkus. It doesn't have to be used in Kubernetes, but that's a main focus. Those two metrics really matter a lot.
Yeah.
For the health of a cluster.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, 40 seconds is a lot. So I would say if you I did some podcasts with Payara users and Whitefly users, and they build microservices, and they started 10 seconds or something. So it is not as bad if you do it properly.
Well, it's sorry to interrupt again. Keep in mind that when you're running in a cloud, you're not getting 4 CPUs. You're getting a portion of a CPU.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a lot of that, I think, is what's driving the 40 seconds. And, if you're running on your desktop, maybe it starts in 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah.
Having said that, some of my clients are really into, memory optimization, and mostly because, the internal memory is so expensive. It's not like the memory is actually expensive, so they have to pay a lot for the RAM. So, and then with Quarkus, we can save a lot of money. So there are business cases, and it's really nice that it starts fast. So back to your point, what I do, if I'm at the very first time on my client, they ask me about Quarkus, I immediately show, the difference between Quarkus, let's say Tomcat, empty or Jetty, Quarkus, and native compilation. And if I show them, how how small the memory footprint is, the discussion stops and we can focus on the real thing, And we say, okay, we always have the option to go to the native compilation. And what is forgotten actually, how small Quarkus is on the VM. So you get already a lot of optimizations. Forget about Graal. Just run Quarkus on the VM. This is already a half of a usual application server. So you can save 50% of a memory with Quarkus without any magic, just running on stock OpenJDK. And this is the interesting part, right? And so I'm just with you. So I'm just people are interested to know about just because it's very easy to talk about memory and CPU. So if there's nothing to talk, you can say, okay, Java is slow, application services are bloated, and you can have a nice launch conversation. But for many clients like startups, they really don't care that much about memory because they have a view services. Whether they pay €2 a month or €10, no one cares. But if I were Netflix or Vodafone, complete different conversation, right? So you cannot just wait until 1 minute until something starts up. But it's not like majority of my clients are Vodafone. This is not. It is probably 3 of my clients have such a problem, and most of my clients are just building boring applications, and the developer experience is the most important thing, I would say.
One of the user studies, I can't remember which one, that was at, again, just go to the Red Hat Summit page, just Google Red Hat Summit, and you can create an account and watch the sessions. Talked about the cost of running microservices in containers and in the cloud, and it makes a big difference. Like, I've seen even tweets or presentations where someone was able to reduce the size of their AWS image because they ran on Quarkus.
Yeah,
right.
You will be able to do so.
And the other interesting stat, there's a stat out there that says for every microservice you create, you have, I think, on average, really 7 instances running somewhere, right? So if I have a user service, you have that user service running in production. Okay, you probably have 2, 3, 4, 5, just depending on the scale you need. But you need at least redundancy, right? And so you at least have 2 to 3.
Yeah.
Then you have some in your staging environment, right? And your testing and so on, right? So multiply that times the amount of RAM that your microservice
and the CI/CD pipeline, another one,
adds up really quick. Yeah, exactly.
Because it has to start and stop. No, I'm really glad that it's so fast. So I don't like that Quarkus is just focuses just on memory and CPU. It's not that important for me, but to give you in the latest workshop, Quarkus is that fast. So what I did the entire time, I just used Maven Clean or Maven package and Java -jar runner, right? So I just started with my traditional way, Quarkus over and over again. And towards the end of the workshop, I say, hey, look, I completely forgot to show you the developer mode and just did, the Quarkus, compile Quarkus.dev. And they say, okay, this was so fast, we didn't even recognize that you don't using the developer mode because I just, do the full build and started Quarkus as a production system, Java -jar. So the developer mode is interesting, but even more interesting is the fact that the standard mode is also is extremely fast. This is not like this is more interesting part. So, and what's you mentioned microservices too often. I try to avoid a little bit microservices. So for me, we always start with monolith, and I think with Quarkus you have also the unique opportunity to use the whole entire cloud native goodness to build the perfect monolith. Because Quarkus is so small, and if you're reasonable, you can actually ship the entire application as a single microservice, which is small, starts fast, and then you are extremely productive. Because, every additional microservice, if they have to communicate without Kafka, let's say, so Kafka is a special case, but if you don't have Kafka, if you have just traditional microservice architecture, every additional or any additional microservice is an additional headache, because how they communicate with each other, what to do with transactions and what on timeout and the whole fault tolerance. If you ship one monolith, you are set. If you can, of course.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole Fowler thing, right? It's like, listen, if you can't if you can't properly loosely couple your services within a monolith, what makes you think you can add a network in between?
Yeah.
Right, with microservices. Okay, I'm heavily paraphrasing, right? Yeah. So the interesting thing is when I talk to most customers, even they admit they write basically what's a good word, microliths, right?
Yep.
Somewhere in between.
Yep.
So it's not a monolith necessarily. It's not a microservice.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, you hear all these benefits of microservices, right? And there's obviously the downsides around improperly architected ones and latency and stuff like that. Then the interesting, I'm going to go back to this Vodafone one because it's fresh in my head because I just watched it actually a second time yesterday. So they actually, because they had written microservices, and based on the way they have to do testings and get sign-offs and approvals in their production, they were able to take their existing service, rewrite in Quarkus with very little risk, and get it into production pretty quickly, right? Relatively speaking to what they do with their monoliths. And he says, if I had tried to do this with my monolith, then it would have taken, I can't remember, 6 months or whatever. So there, there are some truths about microservices, but I agree that starting out with a monolith and make sure you have that right is not a bad way to go.
Yeah. Perfect for final words. So, any else where people can find you? So, if any, links or interesting,
Yeah. So, Jay Klingon on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. I have a blog that I haven't written on in like a year and a half, probably. Just johnklingon.com. I really should probably start writing blogs again. And that's probably most of the place. You'll see me in the MicroProfile community quite a bit in the chats. The MicroProfile, if you're interested in MicroProfile and you want to see how all this stuff is made from a community perspective, we have live hangouts and MicroProfile live hangouts like every Tuesday. You can go to YouTube, the MicroProfile IO channel. And they're kind of boring to watch, to be honest. It's just how sausage is made, right? It's what goes on behind the scenes. So, any of those places, but Twitter's probably where I'm most prolific these days.
Hey, cool. So thank you, and I would be really glad to have you back in the show, in a few months again.
Oh, I'd love it. I'd love it.
Perfect. Thanks.